Again, I just want to say how much I appreciate everyone meeting with us this morning. And I want to encourage you. I know this is kind of YouTube-esque, but to take time to share with other people about the stream and what God is doing in the sermons, especially if God has been helping you and God has been speaking into your heart, and you've seen how much this ministry has helped you. Let other people know about it, and so that they can become a part and participate in it. We're not interested in becoming YouTube fans. Our channel will never be monetized. That's just not what we do. It's not why we're here. We're not here to be famous, and we're not here to be rich. We're here with one purpose, and that is that people can know Jesus. And so share as much as you possibly can. Let people know the live stream. Point them back to the YouTube channel. We have several videos on our YouTube channel that share testimonies of some through music, some are just the testimonies themselves, and it will be a real help to other people in similar circumstances. Amen. Genesis chapter 28. I want to look at Genesis chapter 28. So I have to do a little disclaimer in this sermon because, not a disclaimer, but as much as a confession, that the idea for this sermon came from my son Elliot. And he was telling me about the idea, telling me how he was inspired on the idea and how he was working on a sermon for it. And I told him, I said, sorry, my son, but I'm stealing this one. And because I was, we were talking about it, we were discussing different things, and I was so inspired by the thought that just mentioning the verse in our text, or a verse in our text, I was off and running before he even started to give me the idea. I thought that is a fantastic idea for a sermon, and I told him, I said, let's be honest, I says, mine will be better than yours anyway, so you might as well do something good with it. And he laughed at that. He knew, he knows me, he's not afraid of me, and we have a good relationship, and so I stole it, and I'm proud of it. I'll save the seed of this idea later on, because it really was that one seed that made all the difference, and just began to tell him all the things I was going to do with the sermon, and he got excited about it, and I'm sure someday this will be a combined work that both him and I will have the opportunity to preach. So having said that, I want to get right into it, because I want to talk about what successful people don't do. So I want to look at Genesis 28, verse 10 through verse 15. It says, "And Jacob went out from Beersheba and went towards Haran, and he came upon a certain place and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. Because the sun was set, and he took of the stones of that place and put them for his pillows, and laid down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father, the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, to you will I give it, and to your descendants. And your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And you and your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you in all places wherever you go, and will bring you again to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done that which I have spoken to you of." So the first thing I want to do in talking about what successful people don't do is we need to establish this fact that why I think that Jacob was successful. So we have to start there and kind of give a definition to success in Jacob's life. And why I believe that Jacob is an example to you and I of success is because he had a hunger to be something. And we see this early on in the story of his life. In Genesis chapter 25, this is at a time where Jacob, he has a brother named Esau, who is the firstborn. And he comes in from the field, and Esau, and has been hunting. And this is where we're going to pick up the story. It says that Jacob boiled pottage, and Esau came in from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, "Feed me, I pray you, with that same red pottage, for I am faint." Therefore, his name is called Edom, which basically is the word red. And Jacob said, "Sell me this day your birthright." And Esau said, "Behold, I am at the point of death. What shall it profit? What profit shall this birthright be to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me this day." And he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils. And he did eat and drink and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So what is happening in this text? We need some kind of cultural background here, that Jacob was the second born. And as the second born, he missed out on the blessing that went specifically to the firstborn. If we jump ahead to Genesis 27, we can see the blessing of the firstborn in action, although with a little twist in this particular situation. It says, "And it came to pass, when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau, his eldest son." So listen to this. "And says to him, My son, he said to him, Behold, here I am. And he said, Behold, now I am old, and I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray you, your weapons and your quiver and your bow, and go out into the field, and take me some venison, and make me savory food such as I love. Bring it to me that I may eat, and that my soul may bless you before I die." So I want you to see that this is more than just a family tradition, because Esau doesn't, or Isaac doesn't call Jacob to get a blessing as well. He's got two sons, and he only sends Esau out. He says, "Esau, go out, catch me some venison. You know how much I love it, and I'm going to eat that, and we're going to take time, and I'm going to pronounce the blessing on your life." But he doesn't say that to Jacob, because Jacob's the second born. This is the privilege of the firstborn. And if you look at this, and I don't have the time to go into the details of it, but if you look at this, there were real consequences to this moment. The father would pronounce the blessing, and he would talk about what God is going to do and what his future is going to hold. And there was a blessing like that. You can look at the story. I don't have time to look into it now, but there's a blessing that Abraham, he prophesies, and he says, "This is what's going to happen in the lives of my sons." And you see this with Noah. Noah makes this pronouncement, and then as you look through the scriptures, all the things that Noah said were going to happen to his sons, it comes to pass. And so there's a prophetic and supernatural element to this. And so what Esau is going to receive is he's going to receive a supernatural blessing that is going to be pronounced on him, that is going to go forward into the rest of his life, that Jacob does not have the opportunity for, because he is not the firstborn. He is not available, or this is not available to Jacob. Jacob cannot have this. And so this is interesting that in our text, Jacob says to Esau, "Give me your birthright," because he understands he can't have it. There's no way that this is ever going to happen. There's no turn of events that's going to change things for Jacob. Jacob understands that yes, he will have some sort of something in life, but it's always going to be second rate. But his desire to be something, to be the best, to have everything that is available to a human being, he wants this. And so he says to Esau, he says, "Esau, I'll feed you, but I want that blessing. I want you to give that to me. And here's the irony of this whole thing, is that Esau could really care less. Personally, now this is not in the scripture, but personally, I believe that Esau saw this the way many Christians see the blessings of God, is that this was automatic. This was something that was just going to happen because it's just the nature of things. I'm the firstborn. I'm going to get this. There's no way I can lose this. And so Jacob says, sell me your birthright. I honestly think that Esau looked at this and thought, you know what? There's nothing to sell. There's no big deal here because I'm going to get it anyway. And the reason why I say that is because we see later on, the scripture that I read, is that Isaac calls Esau and says, go out into the field, I'm going to give you the blessing. And so he's convinced that, hey, you know what, I'm going to get the blessing anyway. What do I care how I live my life? What do I care whether or not I have any respect for this blessing? It's going to happen automatically. But that's not what happens. But Jacob has a much stronger belief and a much stronger understanding of things. And he wants this. In Genesis 27, verse 28 and 29, it says, therefore, God give you the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine, and let people serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brethren, and let your brothers and sons bow down to you. Cursed is everyone that curses you. Blessed be he that blesses you. And this is the blessing that Isaac wanted to proclaim over Esau, but again, I don't have the time to go into the details of it, but Jacob pulls a little scam, and he dresses, his mom helps him, it's actually his mom's inspiration, she dresses him up like Esau and says, go in and, tell, because his father is blind, he said, tell him you're Esau, and so this blessing, Isaac is laid his hands on Jacob, thinking it's Esau, and has pronounced this blessing on Jacob. And Jacob wanted this. He didn't want to just get the leftovers. That would have been what he would have missed out on. And he wanted this, and he makes this deal with Jacob or Esau, and he says, I want this blessing. He wanted everything that God would give him. See, Esau didn't care. He was quite happy to pass that on to Jacob when he swore it to him. And so, like I said, Jacob dresses up like Esau. He tricks his father, who's blind, into giving it to him. And the second-born receives the blessing of the firstborn. The funny thing is that for those of you who are familiar with this story, Jacob is a Jacob, the heel catcher, and all kinds of things are said about how Jacob is a scammer and what his name means and all those kinds of things. Heel catcher, he's taking advantage of situations. But the one thing that you need to be careful of here is that Esau or Jacob was only taking what was rightfully his. So you talk about all this scamming. His brother sold him that birthright, and now his brother's trying to take it back again. He should have said, Dad, listen, I'm not worthy of the birthright anymore. I gave that to Jacob. I wanted to eat. I didn't care about the blessing. So that blessing actually goes to Jacob and not to me. He doesn't do that. He's going to take it for himself. And God even comes in and gets involved in this and allows Isaac to be deceived so that Jacob can have that blessing. And so before you go talking about all the bad things about Jacob, I want you to see very, very clearly, not one time do we ever see God disapproving of the things that Jacob did. Keep that in mind. And you say, well, the end doesn't justify the means. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about all the way through, the means. The things that that Jacob did, and we're going to look at some of those, but how God blessed those things that Jacob did. See, so don't get too caught up in this idea of Jacob as the scammer. Malachi chapter 1, verse 2 and 3, it says, I loved Jacob, and I hated Esau. and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the jackals of the wilderness. So what an irony is, here was this blessing that was intended for Isaac, but Jacob, or Esau, but Jacob wants this blessing for himself, and God opens that up, but not only does he open it up so that Jacob gets the blessing of the firstborn, he looks at Isaac and or Esau and says, Esau, you know what? I'm not giving you anything. See, this is a lesson, I think, for all Christians to learn, is that God is looking for people who are hungry for his will. He's not looking for people who think it's going to automatically come to pass. He's looking for people who are hungry. They're giving their heart and mind and soul and strength to getting that blessing. They want that blessing, and that's all there is to it. See, normally nothing could have been done by Jacob to get that blessing, but he got it. So the second thing I want to look at is the examples of Jacob's success. So after Jacob gets this blessing, obviously his brother is not happy that he's switched places with him, that he's stolen his blessing away that actually was given to him by Esau, but nevertheless, Jacob's mother says, okay, listen, you got to go. Because there's fire in your brother's eye. There's blood in his eye. He's gonna do something here. So you need to go away. So he sends him away, and he goes off to his uncle's to stay with his uncle. And he has an eye on this woman named Rachel, who's the second child of Laban. And so he really wants Rachel as his wife. And so he's absolutely madly in love with her, makes a deal for 7 years. He's going to work with Laban in order to marry her. Now, little bit of a qualifier here. You might, wow, what a weirdo. You know, he falls madly in love with his cousin. Well, back then, this was not an issue, okay? The relationships were very, very different back then. Marrying your cousin was actually a preferred thing. It kept you from getting messed up with the wrong kind of people. You could just keep it within your tribe, and you knew what kind of people they were. And so this wasn't a weird thing. In Genesis 29, verse 18, it says, Jacob loved Rachel and said, I will serve you for 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. So Jacob goes to work for 7 years. And then after those 7 years, in Genesis 29, verse 20, the summary, I should say, of those 7 years, it says, Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love that he had for her. So this is a guy who's got his eyes on this girl, and he's got the tenacity to do everything necessary. Remember about the destiny. Remember about how he was about getting the blessing. And so now here he is getting a wife, and he's got the same kind of attitude. I'm going to get this girl. This girl's going to be my wife. I don't care what the cost is. 7 years, that's fine. I'm okay with this. So then 7 years later, patiently waiting and working, comes the wedding night. Jacob is in his room. Obviously, the lights are off, and he's waiting for the wedding night. And so his uncle, who's also a bit of a scammer, switches places with Rachel and Leah. He takes Leah, and he sends Leah in. And so they have their wedding night, and Jacob's a happy man, wakes up in the morning, and it's Leah, not Rachel. I'm sure he's wondering what's going on. And then he figures it out. Genesis 29, verse 25, it says, and it came to pass in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is this that you have done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? So here he is. He's been, faithful 7 years working. He's got his eye on the prize. He's going to marry Rachel. Rachel's going to be his wife. And so he's patient. He works 7 years faithfully working, waiting for that day. The day comes, and his uncle pulls the switch and gives Leah his firstborn, and then he uses this excuse. He says, in our country, the firstborn needs to marry first. Well, it would have been a good idea to say that 7 years ago. But, as I said, and you will see this, Laban's a bit of a scammer himself. And so he says, tell you what I'll do. You can have both of them right now if you'll work for me for another 7 years. And so that's the deal that Jacob makes. And so even though it took 14 years for him to get what he was after, he got it. Now, I will save all the mess that would create for another sermon when he'll work another 7 years married to the same woman, looking forward to being married to another woman. But that's a whole nother sermon, and we'll leave that alone. But here he is, 14 years. He finally got what he was after. During that time, he's had a ton of kids. He's been working faithfully for Laban for 14 years, and he says, okay, it's time to go. Jacob now wants to leave. And listen to what Laban says, and we'll get a clue here as to why he tricked him. Genesis 30:27, Laban says to him, I pray you, if I have found favor in your eyes, tarry or stay here. For I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. And he said, appoint to me your wages and I will give it. So here we can see why the switch. Laban is benefiting from the labor of Jacob because God is blessing Laban because of Jacob's labor. And so again, keep that in mind. See, God's hand is on Jacob during this whole time. So you may look at this and say, oh, look at all the horrible things Jacob's doing. You're misunderstanding what's actually taking place because God wouldn't bless that if he saw it as being underhanded. A little bit later on, we get a little confession. We don't see the details of this. It's just simply mentioned. But in Genesis 31, verse 7, Jacob is getting ready to leave again, and he mentions to Jacob's daughters, he says, your father has deceived me, changed my wages 10 times. So over that 14-year plus period, Laban has been renegotiating the terms of his deals with Jacob. Jacob, you do this, I'll do this. Oh, no, change my mind. Let's do this instead after Jacob has done what he said. And 10 times over 14 plus years, he's been switching the deal. And Jacob has patiently dealt with this because he wants to marry Rachel, because he's a faithful man, and God's blessing is on his life, and God, that blessing is being pouring over into Laban's life. And Laban sees this, and he wants to hang on to this. So finally, in the very end, he says, okay, one last thing we're going to do here. He says, I'll take all the spotted and speckled goats and brown sheep. And then once that's done, we're going to do this, and then once that's done, well, actually, at this point, there's not actually a termination point on this. It's just simply this is the way things are going. And so what happens, though, is Jacob gets a little creative. It's quite interesting. You're going to have a hard time putting this together scientifically. But what he does is he begins to take all of the animals that are strong and bring them to the watering holes where they would breed. And he takes these sticks and he makes notches in the sticks to make them striped, sticks them in front of them so they can see it. And all of the strong animals, when they're reproducing striped and speckled. And so the majority of the animals that are strong are becoming striped and speckled. And so those ones are being separated out into Jacob's herds. And so what happens is that Laban's sons are watching this play out. And so it starts like this. Jacob has hardly anything, and Laban has all kinds of stuff. And so now, because of the deal of the spotted and striped and brown sheep, because of Jacob's creative tending of these flocks, it starts going like this. And so now it's Jacob who has all the animals, and Laban is the one who's losing out, but it was his deal. Laban's sons are looking at this, and they're getting blood in their eyes. See, everybody's ready to attack Jacob when Jacob is blessed. And so that let me just put in there, nothing's changed today, has it? And so here he is, the blessing, the favor of God is on his life, and the sons of Laban are not happy. So Jacob says, you know what, time to go, got to get out of here because this is going to get ugly. And so he takes off. And there's a story behind that. I don't want to go into the details because I don't have time for it. But basically Laban goes to chase after him, and God speaks to Laban. It says, don't dare speak evil or good to Jacob because I'm watching this. And so Laban's after him, like I said, he's after him. He wants vengeance. He wants revenge. And but by the time he gets there, he realized, you know what? If I lay a finger on Jacob, I'm going to have to deal with this between me and God, and I don't want to do that. And so he just says, I just want my stuff back. He apparently had some article, don't even know the importance of this, but some idol that was stolen by Rachel that Jacob didn't know about. Again, not relevant, but so Laban goes back. And Jacob now goes away a blessed man. And like I said, so I find it very interesting to see how many people see all of this as Jacob being a bad guy. And like I said, isn't this how many people view successful people in life? You cheated, you took advantage of people, yet never to acknowledge how they were treated. I mean, look at how Jacob was treated. Here's Esau. Esau makes a fair and square deal. He didn't take advantage of him. He's a fair and square deal. He sees an opportunity to gain the blessing, but he doesn't force Jacob or Esau. Esau says, what do I care about blessing? I just want to eat. I'm going to die. I just want to eat. I'm so hungry right now. I don't care about anything else. See, that's Esau's problem, not Jacob's. And then he works for his uncle Laban, who's changing his wages over and over again. And then he begins to do some things, not underhandedly. He begins to do some things, and it turns out to be God blessing that. It's actually, in some ways, it's a leveling of the playing field by God in these particular situations. But yet, this is how often people look at successful people. That's one of the things, one of the marks that I know why Jacob was successful. Because successful people, there are always people who look at successful people and want to bad talk them or try to talk about all the horrible things and their horrible character and things like that. But see, even Laban cannot deny that while Jacob was working for him, God was blessing him. Yet once the blessing begins to swing towards Jacob and away from Laban, now Laban's upset. And he's the bad guy. So he leaves. He leaves with his wives, his herds, his flocks. He leaves, though, as a success, even though everything was against him. In Genesis 31, verse 11, says, and an angel of God, this is after he's left, and he listened to this. It says, an angel of God spoke to him. This is Jacob saying this. An angel of God spoke to me in a dream, saying, Jacob, and I said, here I am, listen to this. And he said, lift up now your eyes and see, all the rams which leap on the cattle are striped, speckled, and spotted, for I have seen all that Laban does unto you. See, Laban is the bad guy. Esau is the bad guy, not Jacob. One other kind of quick note that I want to throw in here is that on Jacob's way back, he actually wants to make peace with Esau. He's been gone for 14 plus years. And so he initiates getting things right with Jacob. And so he decides that he sends some messengers ahead, and he says, go, prepares this present to take to Esau and out of his abundance. And so he sends him and sends his servants, and his servants go, and as they're there, they meet with Esau. Esau's not really interested in their gift. They come back and they say, okay, so we did what you said, and Esau's on his way back with 400 men. And so that doesn't look good. And so Jacob he's in a panic. He begins to try to set things up so that when his brother comes, he didn't try to flee from his brother. He just sets up, stays where he's at, sets out gifts along the way for Jacob to have as his brother comes, hoping to gain favor with his brother all the way back. And so as Esau comes, Jacob runs out to Esau. And he bows himself down before his brother. Esau runs up and he embraces him. And he's hugging him and he's kissing him and he's looking at this and he's saying, what is all this? What are all these flocks that are separated out that I saw on my way in? And he says, they're for you. He said, the reason why I was going to give them to you is because I'm trying to make peace with you. I'm just trying to, what is he saying? He's saying, God has blessed me, and part of this is because of the blessing that you gave me. He didn't have to do any of these things. He's simply a successful guy. He's able to amend the situations with his enemies. Esau says, you know what? I don't want any of this. I'm wealthy. I've been successful in my way, and I've got flocks and herds and stuff like that. And he tells Jacob, just keep it. I don't want any of it. And he says, no, you take it. I want you to take this. And he presses him, and Esau finally takes it. So the final thing I want to look at is the take-home lesson out of all this. Because I mentioned, what didn't Jacob do? Because I said that's the whole title of the sermon. What don't successful people do? Or what successful people don't do? So let's go back in the text first. I could have just read this one verse because this is the greatest thing. And it came upon a certain place, this is in our text, that he tarried there all night because the sun was set, and he took stones of that place and put them for his pillows and lay down in that place to sleep. Jacob used stones for pillows. Thank you, Elliot. That one phrase, when he said that, just opened up a whole understanding of this guy's character. Jacob was a man who was not looking for the easy road in life. Who uses rocks for pillows? I mean, think about this. Those of you who've been camping, those of you who've been roughing it camping, I mean the serious one, not, those, tents that are like Marriott Hotel. No, I'm real roughing it. Have you used a rock for a pillow? No. What do? You roll up your backpack or something else, soft and fluffy. Even though you're roughing it. Jacob used rocks for a pillow. And then he went to sleep. And then he had a dream. Now, how many of us could do that? How many of us have a hard time? Oh, my pillow is too hard. And it's made out of soft, fluffy stuff. It's too hard. It's not soft and fluffy enough. But you know, the great thing is, here's this man who's not looking for the easy road, who has a hunger to do something in life with his life. He's out in a place and he's got no pillow, grabs rocks, puts him down, goes to sleep, has a dream, and the dream says, Jacob, I am going to bless your life. Verse 13 and 14. I am the God of Abraham, your father, the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, to you I will give it, and to your descendants. And your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. And you shall be spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, to the south. And you and your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. That's the pronounced blessing that came from Isaac, his father, that he stole. Which makes it very clear he didn't steal. Because God says, no, this is what I'm going to do for you. So what does that tell us about God? It tells us that he likes people like that. And he makes them successful. See, you can question Jacob's techniques. You can accuse him of doing wrong. But God makes him successful. The whole world is going to be blessed because of a man named Jacob, a man that could sleep on a rock pillow. If you know the story, just before meeting Esau, his brother, he's alone. And while he's alone, in Genesis 32, it says, Jacob was left alone, and there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. The story goes is that he's wrestling. He says, I'm not going to let go until you bless me. See, there's that same attitude of life, that same character, that same determination. I am going to be successful. I want all that you have for my life. I'm not leaving until you bless me. And he says, what is your name? The angel. And he tells him his name. He says, my name's Jacob. And the angel says, not anymore. But I want you to notice something here, because we read this. It's a translation into Old English that most people read it and don't understand the original language. Even though we have the original Hebrew with us. Often translations are trying to compensate for people not having that understanding, and some things can be missed. But this is what this scripture is actually saying. It's saying, from now on, no one is going to call you Jacob. That's an important point. There's a big difference between your name is no longer going to be Jacob and no one is going to call you Jacob. There's a big, big difference. Because what he's saying, and he changes his name to Israel, he says, you shall be called Israel, which means prevailed with God. And so what he's saying is that people used to call you heel catcher. People used to call you conniver, scammer. People used to call you this. But now they're going to call you prevailed with God. It's not just that you're going to have a new name, you're going to have a new reputation. People are going to see you in a different light. See, that's all Jacob ever wanted. He wanted God's blessing, and he got it. And he was successful. And you might say, Pastor, you have talked to us for 37 minutes and 15 seconds, and you still have not told us what successful people don't do. So I will tell you. The one thing that you'll never see Jacob doing is complaining. Not one time. You never see him complain. You never see him blame. He's always looking for solutions to problems. You don't see him complaining about his treatment. He doesn't talk bad about Esau or Laban. He doesn't talk about how these men have ruined his life, how these men have gotten in the way of the opportunities for his success. He doesn't talk about how Laban changed his wages 10 times. He doesn't talk about how, well, I was born the firstborn, so Esau gets the blessing. I can't have it. He doesn't look at his circumstances and complain. He looks for a solution. And he prevailed. He overcame Laban. He overcame Esau. He even overcame what was the accepted standard for society. And he went on to be the father of the nation of Israel. He is Israel. Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. We still say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob because we still hang on to his old name. But God changed his name to Israel. God changed his reputation to Israel. He is Israel, even if nobody actually understands that. He is Israel. And he started Israel through a man, the nation of Israel, through a man that prevailed with God because he didn't complain about his circumstances. He just looked for solutions. It didn't matter if it was a boss or a brother that made things difficult for him. He never complained. He just looked for a solution. Philippians chapter 2, verse 14 says, do all things without complaining and disputing. See, that's what God likes. That's the kind of man, that's the kind of woman that God blesses. Men and women who don't complain. Men and women who don't blame other things in life for their lack of success. Because you can't be successful like that. See, if you complain and you dispute all the time, you cannot be a success because you will never gain the favor of God. Successful people don't make excuses. They make solutions. Let's bow our heads.